Fred Richani of the Sports Courier Podcast. There's a lot going on in the world especially of professional wrestling, the speaking out movement. It is pro wrestling's version of the Me Too movement. So many questions that need to be answered. We're getting a lot of frequently asked questions about domestic violence, about abuse, about victims, about rape culture, gaslighting. And I thought, why not bring in somebody that is an expert, that has firsthand knowledge of this, and somebody that positively impacts lives every day. So I am proud to bring on the founder of the Nadia's Hope Foundation, which raises awareness about domestic violence abuse, Racha El-Dib, a good friend of mine who does some amazing work in Canada. Racha, how's everything going?
Doing pretty good, amongst everything that's happening. But thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Can you tell everybody a little bit about Nadia's Hope?
Of course. Nadia's Hope was founded last year, but it was unfortunately because of the outcome of my younger sister, Nadia, who was murdered in a case of domestic homicide in Calgary in March of 2018. So it was a case of domestic violence, and we started this organization to raise awareness about her story, but also about what domestic abuse can look like. So we are a registered charity, which is great, and our goal is really to speak to the youth about what a healthy relationship could look like and what domestic abuse can look like, and to properly give them enough information to take that later on into their lives when they enter, full-on adult relationships as well.
Now, what's interesting is that you're not a wrestling fan at all. So you're coming into this from like an outsider's perspective, but obviously you have a lot of experience in the actual, subject matter, because abuse, violence, it doesn't discriminate. And, unfortunately we're seeing that now also in the gaming community. They're kind of having their own, Me Too movement. We saw that with of course, Hollywood and Harvey Weinstein, the Jeffrey Epstein stuff, everything else. But just based on some of the stuff you've read and seen and what we've talked about, like off air, what's your overall assessment of what's going on in pro wrestling right now?
Well, actually, when we were younger, my dad and I and my siblings, we actually used to religiously watch WWE. We grew up, with The Rock and with The Undertaker and with Kane. So we were actually pretty into it when we were younger, but obviously as we grew older, we grew out of it. But it's really it was definitely a very male dominated environment. There would be the random women that would come on and we wouldn't care about it as much because, we want to see the men fight. And that's kind of like the ideology that we have, which is, quite wrong, because we want to be able to introduce women into wrestling because women can wrestle too. But seeing the news, and it's kind of like a double-edged sword, where I'm really thankful that these women are speaking out, but I'm also really heartbroken at the fact that was happening in the first place. But because it's such a highly toxic environment that is super male dominated, what I was reading is that there's a pretty big hierarchy in the wrestling industry, because these men have a pretty big reputation. And when there's a young woman that's coming in and she's new and she's young, she wants to get her career going. And then there's this man who's grooming her into abuse a lot of the times, and rape and assault, because he has that high reputation. And of course, she doesn't want to speak out because she doesn't want to hurt her career because she's new and upcoming. And the men know that they have that kind of power, and they abuse it because they say things like, well, because I have this high reputation, who's going to believe her over myself, who's been here for a long time. And,
definitely a story that's not going away. But what I'm interested in talking about today is a lot of the frequently asked questions, right? Because obviously you have your Twitter trolls and you have a lot of idiots that just like to make noise and annoy people and troll. But there's a lot of people that genuinely kind of don't understand some of these cases. They're lucky enough where they haven't had to deal with this firsthand or secondhand or third hand. So they might ask some of these questions here. So are you ready to answer some of them?
Let's go for it.
Okay. People will always say, why didn't said victim go to the police? Your answer?
My answer is it's not that simple. It takes a really long time for you to even admit or to know that abuse had happened. A lot of the times when you are subject to abuse, whether it's verbal or physical, sexual, however, it takes you a long time for you to even process what happened. And because there's so much trauma happening, your brain goes into survival mode. Survival mode can look like you shutting down and actually forgetting the incident, suppressing the memory, and causing you to sometimes forget what happened or to deny what happened. So it takes somebody a really long time, first of all, to even know that abuse occurred. A lot of the times as well, when it comes to going to the police, again, when you're going against somebody who has such a big reputation, and it takes a toll on you, thinking that nobody's going to believe me. And also a lot of the times, because there might not be evidence, that a case will be dismissed. They'll be like, well, if it was just verbal abuse or if it was something like that, whatever evidence do you have, which can hinder somebody from going to the police and reporting what had happened. And a lot of people say things like, well, why did it take you so long if it happened over a long time? Or why are you speaking out now when this person in position, is out there on the media? And a lot of the times it's because of the fact that they are in a higher position. They're like, I want to talk about what happened because this person should not be in a position of power. You look at things like Trump and in Canada, we don't know their exact names because of course it affects us, but we're not as in tune with the US news. But he hired somebody with the, I'm sorry, you know how they have like a court system, the big court system?
Yeah. Kavanaugh. Yeah. He hired
Kavanaugh.
Yeah.
Yes. So, people think, well, false allegations happened. Well, look at this person, he's still in a really high position of power and he's out there, even with this allegation that happened against him. So a lot of the times these false allegations, well, they don't actually have any repercussions towards that person.
Yeah, that's true. And we should note too, President Trump, he's had like 24 allegations against him. If we're talking about just from a pure wrestling standpoint, Vince McMahon's had allegations going back, to the 80s. The company has been linked to some shady things. Unfortunately, I guess it could be our next topic because a lot of people ask too, like, what's rape culture? And for a long time, I had trouble kind of explaining that as well and thinking about that. But the more I see it, the more I kind of start to understand it. For people that maybe don't understand the concept of rape culture, can you just break that down?
Yes, rape culture is extremely complicated because there's so many different things that are attributed to it. So something like, the purity culture that we have, where a woman is supposed to be pure and is supposed to be alluring because of the fact that she's pure. So we hypersexualize those women. But there's also women who embrace their sexuality, who dress as they want, yet we're demonized for doing that and embracing our sexuality and called names like whores and sluts because we are dressing and acting however we want and embracing our sexuality. And rape culture, it really entails the language as well. So what happens is when you're in a group of men and you have these conversations where you do talk about how a woman acts or what she's wearing at a bar, and you just, you start to talk amongst each other and you call her a whore and you're like, wow, she looks really easy. And these men aren't holding each other accountable to say, hey, you know what, that's actually not okay to say. The way that a woman dresses and acts does not equal consent. So rape culture is also dismissing victims who have come out and spoken against rape allegations and who have spoken against men that have assaulted them or raped them. And rape culture plays a lot, especially in our culture as well, because there's so much pressure as Middle Eastern people that we have this purity, again, that we're supposed to maintain until we get married. And when there is a rape or a sexual assault that happens, there's a huge fear. And this isn't just, for Middle Eastern women, this is for any woman. And the culture really puts a lot of pressure on women to not come out and say anything because of the shame that's going to come out from the community. So we're really silenced in speaking out about our experiences because we really fear about not being marriage material, or the fact that it was somebody close to us, so we're going to ruin their reputation. So there's so many different, it falls into a big umbrella, rape culture, but a lot of it goes again from the purity complex to also objectifying women and the fact that we equal what a woman wears and how she acts to consent, which is not actually true.
Right. And, I think too, when we're talking about rape culture, I feel like there's what I've seen online, there's a lot of these knee-jerk reactions, right? Nobody is saying that you have to immediately assume somebody is guilty when allegations come out. However, I've been stressing this to all the viewers and listeners, we should take them seriously. And your knee-jerk reaction shouldn't be to a victim, oh, you're lying. Like that to me is crazy. But what a lot of people don't realize is that, and I'm not saying this is all authorities, all police or anything like that, but there are a lot of times where a woman or a man that is a victim of abuse, domestic violence, whatever, they go to the police, either nothing happens and or they don't believe them, or they go into the case not believing them, whatsoever. And it astonishes me that we've seen countless example after example, and for whatever reason, people just don't get that.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is that there's a difference between men and women whenever they do come out against allegations. So men who do experience sexual assault or rape, they're dealing with a different type of pressure of, they're not going to believe me. How could I be raped? I'm a man. How could I ever have been assaulted? I'm bigger than this person, or like, how could that happen? They feel that it takes away from their masculinity. But it's actually the opposite. It's so empowering to come out and tell your story, and you might inspire somebody else to speak about what happened as well. And men have so much more pressure of not speaking out. And it goes both ways. It goes both for men and women who are experiencing, wanting to come out and talk about the rape or sexual assault allegations.
And another thing I've been seeing a lot of, and I know you hate this too, is gaslighting. Can you explain to people what gaslighting is? I'm sure they've heard the term, but I don't feel like a lot of people really understand it.
Yes. So gaslighting is not just actually between partners or ex-partners. It can be your family members. It can be your friends. It can be your coworkers. It can be your bosses. So gaslighting is a term where you're made to feel crazy. So you can have an event that occurs between you and one person, and you remember this event extremely correctly, but the other person will lie and will say, well, actually, this didn't happen. I don't remember saying that. I don't remember doing this. You're acting crazy. You don't know what actually happened. And it puts you in a position where you question your own reality. You question yourself to thinking, wow, am I actually being abused, or am I just going crazy, or am I just making things up in my head? And the person who is gaslighting knows what they're doing. And they want to put you in this vulnerable position where they can treat you however they want and make you feel like you're always in the wrong. So again, this can be, I can imagine also it can be gaslighting in the industry between like a boss and an employee where they will come out and speak on something that happened. And then they'll say, well, actually, that's not how I remember it happening. You're actually in the wrong. And especially because there's that power dynamic, they're obviously going to not want to speak out because they don't want to upset their boss. So it happens in so many different environments, and gaslighting is it's very dangerous because then you will start to shut yourself down. You're not going to want to talk to friends or family because you start to excuse their behavior. You're going to say things like, well, they didn't mean it. They've had a traumatic childhood, and you'll start to come up with a lot of excuses to defend them. And so that will prevent you from actually talking to your friends and family, which will continue the cycle of you being gaslit in a relationship, and no matter what relationship it is.
And what's really disturbing too with some of these stories, and I don't know if you've read these in particular, but there's like a number of allegations against this former independent wrestler, former independent wrestler, Joey Ryan, who, would allegedly assault these women and then say something along the lines of, oh, I'm going to kill myself, or I'm going to harm myself. Or there's another wrestler by the name of Jimmy Havoc, who's currently affiliated with AEW. He's in rehab right now, but he was accused at least twice of sexual assault, and same kind of recurring theme. Like, he was mentally abusing somebody, he was sexually abusing somebody, and anytime that they combat that or try to combat that, he'd say, oh, I'm killing myself, or he'd actually allegedly harm himself. So, I mean, in a way, is that gaslight? I mean, would you put that under the category of also gaslighting? Is that more like a complex version of like mental abuse? Because I mean, that's got to be crazy. I mean, you're on one hand, if you're as a victim, you're already dealing with your own trauma, but then to sort of have somebody else's life in your hands, apparently so, when they're threatening their own.
That's actually categorized under emotional abuse and mental abuse. This person knows exactly what they're doing. A lot of the times they actually don't go through with the self-harm, but they want to, again, put you in a position where no matter how you act, or if you threaten to leave or to talk, like you said, then they will harm themselves. So that's a form of manipulation in order for you to not come out or to say something, or even to leave a person in the first place. So that's actually, it's under the category of domestic abuse, of like mental and emotional abuse. But they know exactly what they're doing. Sometimes they go through with it, sometimes they don't. But something like this, these statements should be taken very seriously, and you don't want to brush something like that off. Like a lot of the times police have said, if something like that ever happens, it's better to call 911 for them to investigate what has happened. And it's better to intervene and get them the proper, help that they need, which is, like you said, rehab, and to go to therapy, and to know that this form of manipulation is not okay.
Very well said. Now, I've been advocating to all my fellow men out there that watch and listen to TSC. Obviously, even if you're a quote unquote good guy, you got to do better. If you see some BS, if you see anything that looks like it just looks like harassment, like, you got to call it out. And that's certainly one small way to prevent this, to stop this. But based on your experiences and all the amazing work that you've done, what are some other preventative and combative measures that we can all take to improve not just pro wrestling, but any industry in general, so no man or woman has to go through this kind of treatment?
Mm-hmm. And I think when we think about nice guys, to say that, I haven't raped somebody, or, I haven't done this or that, that doesn't make you a nice guy. That makes you like, that's the bare minimum that you should be doing. You are not a good person for not doing those things. So we have to take it a step further than that. Like you said, you have to call out your friends. The bro code, the bro code does not also entail covering for a rapist. Yeah. That's not how you're supposed to support each other. Right. And I hate also this mentality of, if I have a daughter, I don't want to have a daughter because of how they're acting or whatever, or that when I had a daughter, that's when I started to respect women. It's like, that's actually a human being. We all came from a woman. And the fact that you choose to disrespect women because you don't have a daughter, because you don't see them as human, that's something that I will never tolerate, and that we should not tolerate in the first place. And we have to hold each other accountable because honestly, sometimes we have to have a conversation, because some people don't know that they're instigating and that they're contributing to rape culture by the language that they're using. So we need to call them out and have this dialogue. You don't want to bash people, and you don't want to, jump down their throats and call them a rapist and absolutely attack them. You want to have that conversation, because what's going to happen when you attack them, they're just going to stay closeted. They're going to think those things, and they're just going to keep going with life. We have to be able to have that proper conversation about what they're doing that is wrong and how it is perpetuating rape culture. Rape culture also includes the fact that rapists don't actually get time in jail. Brock Turner, the fact that he only ended up, going for 3 months to jail because he was a good person, that also contributes to rape culture, because that's not going to, push people away from unfortunately committing rape, because they're going to say, well, I only got 3 months. If I do the same thing, well, I won't go to jail for that long, which is an extremely messed up mentality. And like you said, I think the key to not just preventing, but to start talking about it is to start young. So that's why, like, our organization actually goes to high schools in Airdrie, where we actually partner with the RCMP, which is the police that we have here in Canada in rural towns. So we go to high schools and we talk to them about what domestic abuse and violence is, because at that age that we're going, they've already dated. It's not that they're starting, they've already dated. It's, they're dating younger and younger. We're going when they're around 16, 17, and they've probably already had a relationship, or they are in a long-term one. So it's important to go in and talk about what rape is, what mental abuse is, what stalking is. A lot of youth don't know what stalking actually includes. So to give them that proper information, so that, again, when they go into, other relationships, or even their current ones, to know what red flags can look like is really important, because that's going to click in later in life to say, oh my God, I remember learning this in a presentation, that this is actually not okay behavior. So it's really, again, like, I think talking about it is such a big step in and of itself, but there needs to be more. It's not just a simple calling out even. It needs to be, funding proper organizations in order to, again, start young to talk about these issues, because these issues are starting that young, right? And there's extremely high statistics of rape and sexual assault that happens even in universities and campuses. And it's starting earlier than that. So it's not too early to speak about those things and to talk about consent. I think also consent, which is really mind-boggling, can be a gray area for people, whereas we need to address it as a black and white issue. There's no gray area to what consent is. And so, again, to talk to them about that when they're at a younger age, I think is going to help to also empower people to speak about it if it ever does happen to them.
100%. That was so well said. And I think people got to understand something too, because some of these other stories that are coming out are about people that have either been dating or we're in a relationship or whatever. Just because you're in a relationship or married to somebody or whatever, no still means no. Like, it could be your wife, it could be your partner, whatever. If they say no, that still means no. That does not give you a license to just do what you want with no repercussions.
Exactly. Whether that's, like you said, a current partner or a spouse, you have to always ask for consent. And people think, well, consent isn't sexy. It's really, it like throws off the mood. I'm like, if asking for consent is going to throw off the mood, that says a lot about you and the fact that you think consent would throw off the mood of, of a sexual intercourse or whatever is happening. So even just with that mentality of the fact that consent is not sexy or it's not cool, really, we need to shift again that mindset of always asking for consent. Like, it doesn't have to be something like, stringent and like, okay, do you consent to? No, there's other ways to go about it. Of course, that's the best way to be like, hey, are you okay with this? Do you consent to this? It's like, that's the best way. There's other ways that are like, are you okay with this? Do you want to stop? Do you want to take this further? What are your thoughts? That's different ways that you can ask for consent while it's happening or before it happens as well.
Racha, I really do appreciate all the time you've provided. You're a good friend for a reason. You've done some amazing work. I love you and the work that you do. Before we let you go, what's the best piece of advice you give anybody watching this right now? Maybe somebody that unfortunately has experienced trauma or somebody that is hoping to prevent it.
I think the biggest one is to tell people that they're not crazy. Do not think that you're crazy for feeling the way that you are, whether you are thinking that you might be experiencing gaslighting or you're experiencing mental, financial abuse, that you should be talking to somebody outside if you're able to. I know it can sometimes be dangerous or you don't have access to speaking to somebody outside of your relationship, but to know that your feelings are valid. There's nothing that you can ever say or do that will make it okay for somebody to abuse you in whatever way. And abuse does not only come from physical. That's also the tricky part. Is physical, of course, is what makes it most apparent, like there's evidence, but that doesn't mean that mental, financial, spiritual, emotional, or psychological abuse is less important. It's just unfortunately on the inside, so we don't get to see it on the outside that it's happening. But that still means that you're experiencing abuse, and to reach out for help. You're not alone. There's big communities and resources that are out there which can help you. And it's so important to speak out, because when you do, you don't know the amount of people that you're able to reach and to talk to that will be like, wow, I'm actually experiencing this. I should talk about it, and I'm not crazy. Because when you're in a toxic relationship, you are made to feel crazy in order for you to stay in this relationship. So that's my biggest advice: is you're not crazy. Your emotions are valid.
That's so amazing. I'm so glad you said that. And I think that's very indicative of the speaking out movement right now, just like the Me Too movement. One person spoke out against David Starr, another person spoke out, and then all of a sudden a bunch of these people within the business were like, wait a minute, I'm not crazy. Like, I experienced this too. And then again, it set off this chain reaction. And while it's so painful for them to have gone through that, while it's so sad to read about these stories, I think, like you said, in the long run, not only could they bring some change in the industry, but they could be saving somebody's life.
Exactly. And we have to believe people, like you said before. Unfortunately, like you said, that's the knee-jerk reaction of, oh, it must be a fake allegation. They're only coming out because somebody else did. But no, it's a chain reaction. It's this beautiful ripple effect where one person talks about their story, which empowers somebody else to say, this is not okay. I'm glad that, I can speak out about this. And unfortunately, I'm not the only one, but also I want to be able to come out and talk about it as well.
For sure. And Racha, where can fans find Nadia's Hope online?
Yes, we do have a website. So www.nadiashopefoundation.com. We are a registered charity. So when you do make a donation, you will get a tax receipt. So anything helps. We're a pretty small organization, but we definitely want to create a big change. And it's through, people like you who want to spread the word. So thank you, Fred, for being able to, have this conversation with me.
Of course. I love you. You're an amazing person. I love the work that you and your foundation do. And
thank you.
Yeah, I urge everybody to support Nadia's Hope. You can also find them all over social media. You guys have an awesome YouTube channel with some really helpful tips. So like we talked about here today, you have IGTV. Yeah, you started TikTok, which is a very unique way to present your content. And I mean, very, very deep, but really informative in a minute or less. So please follow Nadia's Hope. Even if you can't make it a donation, please spread the word. You could definitely learn something to better your life and make sure that nobody else ever has to go through any kind of abuse. Racha, thanks so much.
Thank you, Fred, for having me. Yeah.